So happy to be here. Thank you for asking me to torment you with my ignorance. But people have survived it before, so I'm sure you'll survive it again. What do we do next? You have some prayers that you do, or?
Yes, I would like, absolutely. I'll screen share the prayers, Dr. Nick.
Somebody lead those, or what?
I will lead the mandala offering, and I can also lead refuge if you'd like. Anyway, here's our short mandala. We'll do the first verse. We'll do the first verse in Tibetan and a second verse in English, followed by refuge. Please join us. Sajipu ki ju shing me tok tram ri rabling ji ni de gen padi sange jin du mi te Drokunam Dahajima Choparshok. From the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be attuned. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamyayatayam. And then on to refuge. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. The merits I create through giving to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam Ha Janchu Badu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chone Sam Dola Penchir Sangye Rupasho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam Ha Janchu Badu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chonen Gepet Sonam Ki Jola Penchir Sange Druparsho.
Okay, so let's just do a couple of minutes silent meditation on the breath. I'm sure you all know how to do that. Just sit in your best meditation posture. Main thing is to keep your back straight. Then bring your mind inside, away from external objects of distraction. And then once inside, make sure to keep it away from internal objects of distraction, mainly the discursive, chattering mind. And then find your breath as it comes in and goes out through your nostrils. So the point where we want to focus our concentration is at the entrance of our nostrils, where you can just feel the breath coming and going. So then generate a strong determination. Now I'm going to focus on my breath without allowing myself to become distracted by anything whatsoever. So with that strong determination, place your full attention on your breath and keep it there for as long as you can. And at the same time, try to be aware, try to remember that that's where your focus is supposed to be. And as soon as your mind wants to wander off, try to be aware of that and not let it do so. If you find your mind has wandered off and you're thinking about something else, then just drop whatever it was that distracted you and just come straight back to the breath and focus on that again. So let's do that for a couple of minutes. So if we've done this meditation effectively, our mind should be a little calmer and clearer than it was before. So now look into your mind and check your motivation for being here at this moment, for this session. So if you find that your motivation is just concerned with your own happiness for this life alone, just trying to seek some benefit for this life and without any thought for future lives, then recognize that motivation as being rooted in attachment, a negative mind, the cause of suffering. So determine not to follow that motivation, but replace it with a positive motivation. So of the three different kinds of positive motivation, let's generate the highest, as we just chanted before, the bodhicitta motivation. So think, the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. in order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. And to reach enlightenment, I have to complete the path to enlightenment. So the path to enlightenment is quite long and tricky, with a lot of pitfalls on the way. So I need a guide to lead me on the path. So in order to understand what sort of guide I need and how to follow that guide, I need to study the teachings on the spiritual teacher. And therefore, I'm going to participate in this session, in this series, on the spiritual teacher, in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So like that, thank you for generating bodhicitta motivation. Okay, so here we go. First of all, you were talking about heart of the path. So this is kind of, from the FPMT's point of view anyway, this is the Bible on Guru devotion. Guru devotion is, sounds a little religious. We could sometimes call it developing a relationship with a spiritual teacher or a spiritual mentor. The word guru is a Sanskrit word. In Tibetan is lama, and the connotation, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche has often said, is the connotation is heavy. The lama is heavy, not overweight, but heavy with knowledge, heavy with Dharma knowledge. Well, some of them may be overweight, but checking your teacher's BMI isn't really part of it. So the implication is heavy, very learned, heavy with Dharma knowledge. And not just knowledge, but deep understanding and realization of the teachings. That's the perfect Lama or perfect Guru. Someone who is learned in the Buddha's teachings, who has practiced them for a long time, and who has direct insight into the meaning of the teachings. There's this saying about the four reliances. See if I can remember them. When I was a medical student, we were taught all these lists of causes of various symptoms. It's called differential diagnosis. So someone presents with a headache, so you have a list of possible causes, migraine or brain tumor or this or that, that you kind of run through and see if you can determine the cause. So these lists, they're numbered lists. So we were always taught that when you're doing an oral examination, when you're being examined by a teacher, you have to examine patients, and then you come and see these examiners, and they ask you questions, and you have to explain what you think is wrong. They said never answer by saying, well, there are 6 possible causes, because then they're going to say, well, what are they? And then you get to number 5, and then they're sitting there waiting for you to come up with number 6. So you're wasting precious time that you could be scoring points by not remembering the 6th. Anyway, the 4 reliances, let's see how we go. So don't rely on the teacher's appearance or reputation, but rely on what the teacher teaches. And when relying on what the teacher teaches, don't rely just on the words, but on the meaning. And when relying on the meaning, don't rely on the conventional meaning, but the ultimate meaning. And when relying on the ultimate meaning, don't rely on intellectual understanding of the ultimate meaning, but on realization or insight into the meaning. There we are, 4. So so that's why we need a teacher with who's who's a true guru, a true lama, heavy with knowledge, who has insight or realization into the meaning of the teachings and teaches from that standpoint. So of course we can't, we can hardly know our own mind, let alone someone else's mind. So it's hard to know who's got a realization or not. And there's also this saying, those who say don't know, and those who know don't say. So if you come across a teacher who boasts about his knowledge or, understanding, be a little wary. It's, a humble teacher is, all things considered, probably one you can trust more than someone who brags about his own qualities. I'm saying teachers can be male or female. These days, still most of the teachers are male, and I'm too old to get my mind around saying they for instead of he or she, but we're trying. Some of the books we're publishing now, we try to go with a sort of gender neutral plural instead of a gender specific singular, he or she, but it still kind of grates a little bit. You young people wouldn't understand, but in fact, in Heart of the Path, I think we put a footnote somewhere about that. Yeah, on page 2. Anyway, so that's one. So this is one book. I looked at the recommended readings, and we put this program, Discovering Buddhism program, together about 20 years ago. Before this book was published, about 2008, 2009, so it wasn't available. So the recommended readings probably would have included that book. Excerpts anyway, but so I suggested not sending out the recommended readings, didn't I, Mary? Yeah, but I looked at them a little more carefully, and I think they're fine. You can send them out.
Okay.
If you haven't.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. I'll upload those. Yes.
There's another book published by Wisdom called Fulfillment of All Hopes. So you'll find that on the Wisdom website as well. Guru Devotion in Tibetan Buddhism. This is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the 50 verses of Guru Devotion, which is a famous text. We'll probably come to this again, but I'll just mention that, the subtitle of this book is Seeing the Guru as a Buddha. So that's a tantric teaching. So I think you must all be familiar with the different divisions of the Buddha's teachings. Mainly it's divided into two vehicles, two yanas, the Hinayana and the Mahayana. So yana literally means vehicle, but it's really referring to an inner vehicle. So just as an outer vehicle, like like your like your car, it takes you from where you are to where you want to go. So the yana, the inner vehicle, the spiritual vehicle, takes you from where you are, the spiritual level that you're at, to the spiritual level you want to ascend to. So in our tradition, where the ultimate goal is enlightenment, so what we want is a vehicle, a yana, that takes us to enlightenment. So that'd be the Mahayana, the great vehicle. And it's called the great vehicle because it takes you to the ultimate destination. A lot of people don't like the term Hinayana, which literally means low vehicle or lesser vehicle. Someone tried to get around, one of the translators tried to get around that sort of disparaging implication by calling it the modest vehicle. I don't know if that really did the job. Some people call it the individual vehicle and the Mahayana the universal vehicle. That's not bad. Individual vehicle, I don't know about universal vehicle so much, but individual vehicle kind of makes more sense in that the goal of the Hinayana, so-called Hinayana, lesser vehicle, or the individual vehicle, or what's it called here? Okay, now I'm looking at this book here, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron, the American nun. Everyone knows who she is. She's the abbess of Sravasti Abbey. She first met the Lamas, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche at Lake Arrowhead in California at the meditation course, the first American Lam Rim meditation course in 1975. That was the year I happened to be traveling with the Lamas. So that's when I met her for the first time too. So she became very devoted to the Lamas and to the Dharma and became a nun a couple of years later, and has really, it's a wonderful example, a wonderful practitioner. And now she started this nunnery, Sravasti Abbey, in Washington State, and she runs that. But I mean, she's also a co-author with His Holiness the Dalai Lama of not just this book. So this is volume 2 in a series. Just so happens, hang on. So this series so far has 5 volumes. This is volume 1, Approaching the Buddhist Path. And volume 2 is the one I just showed you, the Foundation of Buddhist Practice. Volume 3, Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature. Volume 4, Following in the Buddha's Footsteps. You'd think I still worked at Wisdom Publications. Volume 5, In Praise of Great Compassion. And there's a book that she did with His Holiness before that called Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions. So full disclosure, I have these books, but I haven't read them yet. I have a lot of books that I haven't read. Not most of those, not most of those. But I feel comfort having them there. And someone once said, you don't really have to have all that not much knowledge yourself. You just have to know where to look it up. So, so that I abide by that principle. If I want to know something, I know where to look it up. Okay, so so this book that I was looking at, I forget what they call. I mean, I'll come across it in any moment now, but they have a different term for the Hinayana. In fact, Wisdom have just published a book which I'm getting. When I left Wisdom Publications to start the archive back in '96, I made this deal that we get a free copy of every book they published. So, so that's how we managed to accumulate these amazing books. There's a book, I forget what it's called. It's written by a Theravada monk. So that talks about, I forget what it's called, conceit in Buddhism or something like that, where people who practice one tradition feel superior to those who practice another tradition. And in fact, one of the benefits of the Lam Rim, as Pabongka Rinpoche explains in this book, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, one of the benefits of the Lam Rim is that understanding the Lam Rim teachings, stages of the path teachings, prevents us from creating that very serious mistake of disparaging one of the Buddha's teachings, one aspect of the Buddha's teachings over another. So saying that Mahayana is superior to the Hinayana. Lama Yeshe was particularly down on that. There's a little book we published called The Essence of Tibetan Buddhism, where Lama Yeshe explains the three principal aspects of the path and gives an introduction to Tantra. And he says that people who think, oh, I'm a Mahayanist, I'm practicing the great vehicle, so I'm superior to those who practice the lesser vehicle. He said that that's kind of a nonsensical thing to say or think. And people who say that, they probably don't even qualify as followers of the Hinayana, let alone the Mahayana. But it's called the individual vehicle, or the, by some people, the lesser vehicle, because the goal is, what can I say? I don't want to say inferior, but it's not as, anyway, the goal is individual liberation, to free oneself from cyclic existence, to realize the ultimate nature of one's own mind, and to free oneself from delusion and karma and attain nirvana, or individual liberation. So that is like an incredible achievement. But the motivation is still, from the great vehicle Mahayana point of view, it's kind of selfish, because one's only concerned with one's own suffering and not the suffering of others. Certainly not the suffering of all the infinite, beginningless, numberless sentient beings that exist. So the goal of enlightenment is to, as I said at the beginning, is to reach enlightenment. The goal of reaching enlightenment is to free all sentient beings from suffering and lead them all to enlightenment. And in order to do that, we have to become enlightened ourselves. So attaining individual liberation, or freeing ourselves from cyclic existence with the motivation of just freeing ourselves from cyclic existence, that's not enough. And that's not the end of the road. Lama Yeshe used to say that, to reach nirvana, or to free oneself from cyclic existence, is an incredible achievement. You know, we've been suffering, and you know, most other sentient beings have been suffering in cyclic existence since beginningless time. We've been under the control of delusion and karma since beginningless time. I mean, it's really hard to get our mind around that. That you look at your mind. So we sit here looking at our mind, you know. And we think, this mind, this stream of consciousness is running through my head, wherever it is, it's just running through. This has been around since beginningless time. It is really old. So to free ourselves from the beginningless ignorance that has been driving our lives in cyclic existence since that time, it is really an incredible achievement. It takes very strong renunciation. So renunciation is, you know, we all renounce suffering. No sentient being wants to suffer. So we have kind of this innate renunciation of suffering. You know, we don't like suffering. But the problem is we love creating the cause of suffering. We love following the delusions. You know, we love following attachment. We often don't see anything wrong with anger. We feel sort of, you know, righteous anger. And we're not really aware of the ignorance that's behind both the attachment and the anger, and then all the other delusions that spring from those. And we always think, you know, I, you know, me, mine. But we don't even know who the I is. And that is our fundamental ignorance, not understanding the nature of the self. You know, and believing that it really exists, this strong sense of self, this strong feeling of I that we have, that we, you know, usually feel in our heart. You know, if you're driving along in your car and then someone swerves in front of you, this strong sense of I that arises at that time makes you, you know, causes road rage. This I is there, always there. This is who we work for. But why our view of that I is ignorant is because the way we feel it exists, the way we conceive it to exist, is mistaken, that it doesn't exist in that way at all. We feel that there's this independent I. You know, yesterday I did this, tomorrow I'm going to do that, as if there's this unchanging entity, this unchanging self within us. Last year I did this, you know, I was born here. There's no such self. We feel it exists, we operate as if it exists, but in fact it doesn't. And it's so hard to shake that belief because it's been with us since beginningless time. It's innate. We're born with it. And all sentient beings in cyclic existence were born with it and operate, you know, under its direction. So renunciation is, you know, so because of that belief in the false I, the wrong conception of the self-existent I, that wrong conception of self, coupled with our innate wish to be happy and not to suffer causes attachment to arise. We become attached to people and things that make, and experiences that make us feel good, that cause a pleasant feeling to arise in our mind. And then when something disturbs that attachment, so we get attached to these pleasant experiences and what we think causes them. And then when something comes along to disturb our attachment, we get angry, we get upset, we get irritated. Or if things don't work out the way we planned or wanted, we get annoyed, we get upset, we get angry. So all these shades of, desire and attachment and craving and anger and irritation and resentment, all these, branch delusions, they all come from these three poisonous minds: the ignorance, attachment, and aversion. So it's very hard not to follow attachment and aversion. But though following those negative minds is what causes sufferings, the different sufferings we experience. And what we need to renounce is not the experience of suffering, but the cause of suffering. And the cause of suffering is ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And the hardest thing in a way to renounce is happiness, the samsaric happiness, the temporal happiness. It's not real happiness, it's not true happiness, but we don't know that. And so we get attached to these pleasant sensations, and it's hard to renounce the things that we our whole life is spent trying to be happy, and we have these little experiences of happiness. So renouncing these pleasant experiences is very hard. But if we want to escape from cyclic existence, that's what we have to do. So those who can, to attain freedom from cyclic existence, to attain liberation, we need to be motivated by renunciation, and not renunciation of just the suffering we experience, but the cause of suffering. So what we have to do to attain liberation is to practice the three higher trainings based on renunciation of suffering. We have to follow pure morality, or pure conduct. So there are three higher trainings: conduct, concentration, and wisdom. So on the basis of pure moral conduct or ethical discipline, whatever you want to call it, not creating negative karma, creating positive karma, we need to develop perfect concentration. So, I don't know who's here, but we did a little bit of concentrative meditation at the beginning. We tried to concentrate on our breath for 2 or 3 minutes. So I think most of us at that point would have understood that our concentration is far from perfect. We should be able to concentrate on our breath for minutes, hours, days, even weeks at a time. With perfect concentration. So the cover of this book, this is called a Shine chart. Shine or in Tibetan, or shamatha, or calm abiding. Shamatha in Sanskrit, calm abiding in English. There are 9 stages of developing this perfect concentration. And this chart shows the steps in the development of perfect concentration. So on the basis of pure moral conduct, we practice meditation and develop perfect concentration. So with that, we can meditate, as I said, for days or even weeks without moving, sustained by sort of psychic energy. I can't do it, I'm just pretending. Once we have perfect concentration, what's it for? It's an incredible blissful experience. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, when you've achieved it, I don't know, maybe this is not the whole chart here. By the end, there should be a monk. So maybe it didn't fit on the cover. But it shows this, the chart shows this monk here, the meditator, running behind the elephant and the monkey. So the elephant is the sleepy, heavy, foggy mind, and the monkey is the chattering, discursive, distracting mind. So gradually the monk gets closer and closer. Then by the end, he's leading. The monkey's gone and he's leading the elephant. But it should show, by the end, he should show him flying in the air. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls that rapturous ecstasy. So, ecstasy is good. Rapturous is good. Rapturous ecstasy is unimaginable bliss. So, that'd be nice, but that's kind of a side effect. That's not the point. That's not the purpose. That's just what comes by the way with perfect concentration. So as our mind gets more and more concentrated, more and more calm, sort of this inner happiness and inner bliss and inner tranquility that sort of lies within all of us is able to come to the fore, because our mind isn't totally distracted by our attachments and our bad habits and, everything else that it's distracted by. So the purpose of developing perfect concentration is to analyze the nature of reality, or the ultimate meaning of life, the ultimate nature of our own mind, really. So to see through the wrong conception of self-existent I, to see that while the I exists, the self exists, the person exists, the person who goes to enlightenment exists, but not the way in which we conceive it to exist. That there is no independent, inherently existent, permanent, unchanging self within us. That all we are is an ever-changing combination of body and mind, ever-changing, but since beginningless time, our ignorance has been labeling a self, on a permanent self, on those two ever-changing factors, body and mind. So our ignorance looks at our ever-changing body and mind and labels a self, an I, on those ever-changing aggregates. And then our ignorance labels I, and then the I appears back to our ignorance as if it were actually coming, as if it weren't merely labeled, as if it was actually really there. And then we believe in that. We believe what our ignorance tells us. That's what we've been doing since beginningless time. Why that happened? I don't think anyone can tell you. That's just how it is. That's what the Buddha discovered. You know, it wasn't made by God or somebody, by the Buddha or somebody else. It's just how it is. So the Buddha discovered the way things were and the way to change things. But in order to cut through the beginningless veils of ignorance, we need a really sharp sort of laser-like weapon, and that's our perfect concentration. So with perfect concentration, and studying the teachings on ultimate reality and meditating on them, so we can realize the way in which the self actually exists. So in order to do all that, you know, to embark on that journey, to renounce the causes of suffering and even samsaric happiness, you know, ordinary worldly happiness, and to practice pure morality. The essence of that really is taking precepts, making vows, not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to use intoxicants. I mean, these are the 5 basic lay vows. And then on top of that, we have the monastic vows and so on and so forth. To embark on that journey requires really strong determination. Okay, now I understand the nature of cyclic existence. I understand how karma works. I want to get out of this cycle of suffering, cycle of death and rebirth. So to do that, I have to put myself through certain hardships to develop perfect concentration. And then I have to undertake the difficult studies that, you know, explain about the nature of you know, the way things exist, and to study the teachings on emptiness, and then meditate on them, and then realize them. So, you know, I'm saying all this because it just to attain individual liberation takes a lot of effort. But once we've put in that effort and attained the result, this incredible, I mean, so attaining single pointed concentration brings the experience of rapturous ecstasy. And again, there's danger to get attached to that, and then, and you know, that attachment to the different levels of happiness you experience through getting higher and higher levels of concentration, that can cause that attachment to those higher levels of concentration causes rebirth in the higher God realms. So we know from our studies of the Lam Rim so far, I think most of us, I don't know who you guys are, but let's assume know something of the Lam Rim. So there is, in samsara, cyclic existence, there are 6 realms, 3 lower realms and 3 upper realms. And in the upper realms is the human realm, and 2 God realms. There's sort of the warring gods, the anti-gods, and then there's the God realms. So in the God realms, the highest of the 6 realms of cyclic existence, there are 27 levels. . So there are 6 levels of worldly gods. So we also divide cyclic existence into the 3. So we talk about these 6 realms, the 3 lower realms, the hell realms, hungry ghost realms, the animal realms, and the 3 upper realms, the human realm, the anti-god realm, the demigod realm, and then the God realm. But we also talk about, they can also be described as the 3 realms. There's the desire realm, and the form realm, and the formless realm. So if we look at it that way, if we put those 2 sets of realms together, the desire realm contains 5 of the 6 realms. It contains the 3 lower realms, it contains the human realm, and it contains the demigod realm, the asura realm, and it contains the lower 6 levels of the 27 levels of the god realms. So the lower 6 god realms are in the desire realm. Then there are 17 levels of form realm and 4 levels of formless realm. So the sentient beings in the formless realms don't have a body. They just exist as they just have mental aggregates, and they're and they're meditative absorptions. So their mind of those sentient beings are absorbed in 4 levels of concentration: infinite space, infinite consciousness, neither perception nor non-perception, and the summit, the peak of samsara. So in the form realms, the sentient beings have bodies, but they're very subtle form bodies, and those beings are absorbed in 17 levels of concentration. And so we get born in those realms by practicing, by developing different levels of perfect concentration, and then becoming attached to that bliss or the pleasant feelings that come from having achieved that level of concentration. And by getting attached to that, we don't make further progress. We don't analyze the nature of reality, and we don't escape from cyclic existence, and we remain basically unconscious in those different levels of concentration. So when we're born in that realm, we were aware, oh, now I'm being born in the form realm. And then your mind immediately goes into that absorption. And then at the end, we've used up all our merit, all our good karma. We become aware, now I'm leaving the form realm. And then we get reborn in the lower realms, where we have to suffer again for a long time. So, that's a mistake that meditators can make. So, it takes a lot of understanding and self-discipline to avoid getting sucked into that as well. So what Lama Yeshe used to say, as I mentioned a little while ago, it takes incredible effort and energy and dedication to escape from cyclic existence. So when we the experience of attaining liberation is far more blissful than any of those other levels of bliss that we experience through attaining the different levels of concentration. But at least at that point, we've transcended cyclic existence. But there's such, relief that the arhat, which is what they're called, person who's attained liberation or nirvana, goes into that experience of incredibly blissful experience with a feeling, now I've achieved the goal, and can remain in that state for eons, in a vast period of time. So good for that person, good for that arhat, but not so good for the other sentient beings, because that being, that person, isn't doing anything to help others. So he's helping others by not remaining in cyclic existence and, causing trouble like the rest of us do. So, sort of by default, he's not causing trouble, but he's not really helping either. But it's just relaxing. But and remains in that state for a long time because of that person's strong motivation, strong determination, great effort to reach that goal. So the Lama used to say that eventually, even that energy begins to wane. Like I said, after a long time, after many eons. We all know how long an eon is, right? While you're contemplating that, I sip my tea. Someone asked the Buddha, how long is an eon? And the Buddha said, imagine a block of granite, a cube of granite, 1 league high. What's a league? I think 7 miles. Let's talk English. 7 miles high, 7 miles wide, and 7 miles deep. There's a block of granite with no cracks or crevices. It's solid. And then once every 100 years, someone comes out with a chiffon. Chiffon is like this very fine gossamer silk, right? Someone comes out with the finest chiffon from Varanasi, Benares. So I guess in Benares, in India, that's where they used to make the finest silk. Too bad for the silkworms. Comes out with the finest chiffon from Benares and lightly strokes that block of granite and then goes back. And then 100 years later, someone else comes out with a piece of finest chiffon from Benares and lightly strokes that block of granite. Then 100 years later, another stroke. So the Buddha said that block of granite would be worn away by that stroking it with silk before 1 eon has passed. So there was some other analogy too, with a vast bucket of sesame seeds, and every 100 years you remove a sesame seed. But anyway, it's a vast period of time. So when they talk about the paramita, the Mahayana path to enlightenment, the paramita path of the perfections, so as I said before, there are these 2 yanas. Okay, before I get to that. So the arhat stays in this deep concentration in the bliss of nirvana, bliss of liberation, for eons. But eventually that energy wanes. So then, as Lama used to say, the Buddha comes knocking on the door. There's no door, but, enters the arhat's mind. There's no body either. And communicates. As the concentration begins to wane slightly, the enlightened being has access. So the Buddha then says to that arhat, hey, wake up. Wonderful achievement, attaining liberation, but your job's not over. Look, there are countless sentient beings that you've left behind, still in suffering. And there's the ultimate goal, way up there, enlightenment. You've still got a long way to go. So at that point, then the arhat, the one who's attained individual liberation, has to enter the Mahayana vehicle and begin to develop bodhicitta. And then go through, become a bodhisattva, and then ascend the 10 bodhisattva levels to finally achieve enlightenment. So that's a really long time to get to enlightenment. From the beginning, when you want to become an arhat, and then all that long period in the bliss of nirvana, and then you have to wake up and again enter another path, Mahayana path, and follow that all the way to enlightenment. Sentient beings who have been waiting for that person to become enlightened really have to wait a long time. So they liken it to crossing a river. So, you probably know this analogy, but, there's a river that's very wide and deep, and the water is very turbulent. And that river is formed by 2 tributaries. So it's kind of like a Y shape, So to get to the other side, you can cross the wide part, or you can go to the 2 tributaries before they join, and you cross one, which is relatively easier, and then you're on land, and you relax there for a while, and then you cross the other tributary, and then you finally get to the other side. So that's crossing the 2 tributaries likened to first attaining nirvana, and then we're staying there kind of on the intermediate land for a while, and then crossing the second branch. Then eventually, so you get to the other side that way. So you get to the other side, but it takes longer. But if you cross where they've joined, you only have to do one crossing, and it may be harder, and it may be more dangerous, but you get to the other side more quickly if you cross where they've joined rather than you cross one and then the other. So the only thing that matters really is that all sentient, from Mahayana point of view, the only thing that matters is all sentient beings getting enlightened. That's our ultimate goal. That's the Buddha's ultimate goal. That's the Lama's ultimate goal, that all sentient beings attain enlightenment. So better to do it in one hit than 2. So the motivating factor that determines which path we're going to follow, which yana we're going to follow, Hinayana or the Mahayana, is compassion. If your compassion for yourself is stronger than your compassion for others, then you're going to follow the Hinayana. You're going to look after number 1, yourself, and not worry so much about the others. It'd be nice if they got enlightened. It'd be nice if they were free from suffering, but that's their problem. So then with the Mahayana, there are also 2 yanas within the Mahayana. There's a Paramita yana and there's the Vajrayana. So the Paramita yana, or the Sutra vehicle, or the perfection vehicle, is followed by bodhisattvas who want to reach enlightenment. And the Vajrayana, the tantric vehicle, the Tantrayana, the Mantrayana they all have these different names, is also followed by bodhisattvas who want to reach enlightenment. But they really want to reach enlightenment. They want to reach enlightenment quickly because they can't bear that sentient beings remain in suffering for even a second longer. So these practitioners who want to follow the Vajrayana, they look at the Sutrayana, the Paramitayana, and see, wow, it takes to follow the Paramitayana, which is what Shakyamuni Buddha did. It takes 3 countless great eons. Let that sink in. An eon is what we said. You know, the block of granite. 3 countless great eons. So a great eon is much longer than a regular eon. A countless great eon is countlessly greater than a great eon. And there are 3 of them. 3 countless great eons. So that's a really long time. I mean, how many blocks of granite is that? So I think in terms of the 10 bodhisattva levels that I just mentioned, in the first countless great eon, you accomplish the first bodhisattva level. In the second countless great eon, you get to the end of the 7th bodhisattva levels. So the first countless great eon is the first bodhisattva level. The second great eon is 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th bodhisattva levels. And then the third countless great eons is the 8th, 9th, and 10th bodhisattva levels. And so in these, you know, life after life after life, we're practicing bodhicitta and the 6 perfections, you know, the perfections of generosity, morality, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. So there are these different perfections that we're gradually perfecting over 3 countless great eons. So I don't have it here to wave at you, but there's Jeffrey Hopkins' book that we published at Wisdom in '83 called Meditation on Emptiness. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. It's an amazing book, but that contains all the details of the 10 levels and all these different things. And the book that deals with these 27 God levels is also, I don't have it here, right, it's on one of the shelves there, but it's called Meditative States in Tibetan Buddhism. Lati Rinpoche and Demalocha Rinpoche, Jeffrey Hopkins and Lea Zala. Meditative States in Tibetan Buddhism, it describes all these different these different levels of form and the formless realms, so on. And meditation on emptiness, it's got all the nuts and bolts of the Mahayana path explained in detail there. So it's an incredible, useful reference book. Meditation on Emptiness, Jeffrey Hopkins. It was his PhD thesis that he made into a book, and then we published it at Wisdom for him in '83. So the bodhisattvas who have unbearable great compassion that sentient beings don't suffer a moment more in samsara, they look at this 3 countless great eons it takes to follow the Paramitayana path to get enlightenment. And they say, I can't take that. I can't take that long before I can benefit sentient beings in the ultimate way. Isn't there a quicker path? So for those bodhisattvas who have great intelligence and the ability to undertake very difficult practices, who are driven by this unbearable compassion to free all sentient beings as soon as possible. For those, the Buddha showed the Vajrayana, the tantric vehicle, through which it's possible to attain enlightenment in even one lifetime of this degenerate age. So like Milarepa attained enlightenment in his lifetime, or Gyalwa Ensapa, or there are other famous lamas who attained enlightenment. Now, attaining enlightenment in one lifetime doesn't mean you start from scratch. I mean, it means you've done incredible work in previous lives. But in this life, in that one life, you may not have been born into the Dharma, but from when you started practicing Dharma, whether you were a child or an adult, whatever you were, like Milarepa was an adult, and he created a lot of negative karma. He killed a lot of people before he actually met his guru, Mapa, who put him through some very severe trials and tribulations in order to purify his mind and purify his negative karma. And then he reached enlightenment. He had done incredible work in his previous lives, but it took purification in his last life as a human being to enter the Vajrayana path and then become enlightened. Also, Tilopa and Naropa. Naropa was a scholar who met his guru Tilopa, who looked like this degenerate beggar when he first met him, but he led him to enlightenment. So anyway, there are these stories. So there are these three levels of path or yana, the Hinayana, the Mahayana Sutra vehicle, and the Mahayana Tantric vehicle. So you can see that there are a lot of things to learn. There are a lot of meditations to do. There are different paths to practice, and there are different ways to practice. So in order to know what to do and how to do it, we need a teacher. We need a lama. We need a guru. We need someone who has followed the path, who knows the path, in order to lead us on it. So, in a way, it's kind of obvious that, we could read books that explain the path to enlightenment ourselves, but to read the teachings, to read a book is one thing. To know how to put it into practice, to know which are the right practices for ourselves at this particular time, to know what to focus on. And then later on, if we want to practice the Vajrayana to attain enlightenment as quickly as possible, there are many hundreds of deities, meditational deities. So a meditational deity is an aspect of the enlightened mind, that the enlightened mind manifests according to different sentient beings' karma. So to know which of these hundreds of different meditational deities relate best to your mind, we need a teacher to tell us. So to practice the Vajrayana, a quick path to enlightenment. The first main prerequisite is ideally realization of the three principles of the Lamrim path, the Sutra path, the three principles aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and the right view of emptiness. Someone who's realized those teachings is the perfect candidate to practice the Vajrayana. But, we don't have realization, even the first step on the path. Which is guru devotion and the perfect human rebirth. So we don't, these very early steps, we don't even have realization of that. But so at least we need a clear intellectual understanding of the three principal aspects of the path. So on that basis, we may be qualified to enter the Vajrayana. To enter the Vajrayana, quick path to enlightenment, we need to find a perfectly qualified teacher, a Vajra master, and receive initiation or empowerment. And then we need, so in the Vajrayana, in the Tantric path, there are 4 levels of Tantra. There's the Kriya, Charya, Yoga Tantra, and highest Yoga Tantra. So most of the teachers from whom we receive teachings, Vajrayana teachings these days, they're either giving Kriya, the lowest Tantra, Kriya Tantra initiations, or highest Yoga Tantra. The Charya and Yoga Tantra, the middle two, I'm not sure. Don't hear that so much. So with highest Yoga Tantra, which is what we need to practice if we want to achieve enlightenment most quickly, and there are also teachings that say that even a 10th level bodhisattva has to practice highest Yoga Tantra before he can reach enlightenment. With the practice of highest Yoga Tantra, you need to receive the initiation. You receive, well, as in all tantric initiations, you receive bodhisattva vows, but probably you would have received bodhisattva vows separately even before the tantric initiation. His Holiness just gave them online the other day, the bodhisattva vows. So I think he'll, His Holiness is doing a lot of teachings like us on Zoom these days, and he's loving it. Doesn't have to schlep around the world everywhere. And, we used to think in the earlier days that, to receive initiation, you had to be in the physical presence of the teacher, or to receive an oral transmission of a teaching, you had to be in the presence of the teacher. Apparently not. These days you can receive it online, oral transmissions and initiations and bodhisattva vows. I guess you can get refuge and lay vows online, on Zoom or whatever platform they're using as well, I guess. So to practice the Vajrayana, we need initiation, we need to get the tantric vows, we need the commentary, we need an explanation, and we need ideally also oral transmission of the sadhana. The sadhana is, you know what a sadhana is. The sadhana, Sanskrit word, sadhana, sadhana, translated as method of accomplishment. So when we do a deity meditational retreat, we meditate on a deity. So, if we're trying to develop wisdom, we might do a retreat on Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. The highest Yoga Tantra aspect of Manjushri would be Yamantaka. Or we might, if we want to develop compassion, we might meditate on Chenrezi, Avalokiteshvara. The highest Yoga Tantra aspect of that would be Chakra Samvara. Anyway, so we need a qualified teacher to explain all these different practices and to tell us which would be the best deity out of these hundreds of different meditational deities, such as Tara, such as Chenrezi, such as Yamantaka, such as Manjushri, and so on and so forth. Which one we have a close connection with and which would be the most fruitful for us to practice. So, I don't know if I can. I'm just going to try and do something here. Hang on. Just want to share my screen for a moment here. What am I looking for? I'm looking for this. So, can you see that?
Yes, liberation in the palm of your hand. Yes.
So this is the outline. I don't know if you've seen this chart. This is the simple chart. There's a 46-page one, but this shows all the steps of. This shows the steps of the path. So, are you familiar with this outline? So it's, well, I can send the links to Mary and she can share them. Actually, I could probably share it here, but anyway, so so why isn't that coming up? Okay, so this shows the beginning of the outline. So it shows, it's like a roadmap to enlightenment. So it shows the greatness of the authors. It talks about Atisha, basically, who first presented the Buddhist teachings in this sort of Lamrim fashion, stages of the path. Then it talks about so the greatness of the authors, the greatness of the Dharma, then how to listen and how to teach the Dharma that has these greatnesses, these two greatnesses, and then the sequence in which the disciples are taught the actual instructions. So, so that's divided into can you see this? The route of the path, devotion to the spiritual guide. And so this is the outline of this topic that we're supposed to be doing, spiritual teacher, according to following Lama Tsongkhapa's great Lamrim Chenmo and Pabongka Rinpoche's liberation in the palm of your hand. So, we'll come back to that another time later, but so first we develop devotion to the spiritual guide, and then there's the training we should undertake after we've begun to rely on our spiritual guide. So the first step there is the stimulus to extract the essence from our optimum, or from our perfect human rebirth. So there's the teaching on the perfect human rebirth. So that the detailed teaching on that is, the best teaching on perfect human rebirth is Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book called The Perfect Human Rebirth, that really goes into the topic. And then having stimulated or exhorted or encouraged ourselves to extract the essence from our perfect human rebirth, to make our life most meaningful, to get the most out of it, then it's how to extract the essence. So then there's training in what he calls here, which is in liberation, the small scope, the medium scope, and the great scope. So then the outline has the training in the small scope here, and then the intermediate scope, or the path of the middle capable being. So there's all these steps. And this is the summarized version. There's the longer version, which I'll also send you the link to. And then here's the great scope, the Bodhisattva path. So each of these little boxes is a topic to understand, meditate on, and realize. And there are many more than are shown here. Okay, so I'll send you, if I don't send them to Mary can remind me. So the point is that this is a long and detailed path. And if we need a teacher to teach us how to play the piano or how to play golf, well, I mean, you can pick up these things yourself, but it's more efficient to have a teacher. We all had teachers to teach us to read. You know, none of us taught ourselves to read, I don't think. Anything we want to, even to ride a bike, we need a teacher. So I'm thinking the only skill we maybe didn't need a teacher for was how to suck on our mother's breast. That sort of came naturally. But we may have even learned that in a previous life anyway, or been taught that in a previous life. But so I don't even know why it's a question that needs to be addressed, why we need a spiritual teacher. But it's the first topic we're supposed to discuss here. I think it's kind of obvious. And if you look at this outline of the path to enlightenment that we're supposed to follow and meditate on, then, I think, of course, we need a teacher. So how do we find a teacher, and how do we check the teacher's qualifications? If we're going to go to, if you go to school, kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, what do they call it in America? Middle school, high school, is that how it goes? Primary school first, is it? Elementary school, what do they call it? Anyway, whatever school, or you go to university, you don't pick your teacher, usually. Certainly when you go to kindergarten, elementary school, you get stuck in a class and that's your teacher. So when you go to university, you decide what course you're going to do, economics or medicine or architecture. You go to your first year, and those professors are who you get. I mean, maybe you can change sometimes, but generally speaking, that's who you're stuck with. So those teachers are paid to impart knowledge of certain topics to you. And then at the end of the year, you do exams. And if you pass the exams, you go on to your next year. And then you get those teachers who teach the second year students, and they impart the knowledge that second year students are supposed to get. I don't know. So when we have a different system in Australia, and we follow the English system in medical school, we just do 6 years from beginning to end. Here, I think you have to do a 4-year college degree, and then you go to medical school, and I don't know how many years it is after that, 3 or 4 or something. So in our first year, we had biology, chemistry, and physics. I hated physics so much I can't even remember who my physics teacher was, my first year at university. Biology I remember, chemistry I'm not sure either. Anyway, you would do those things, and then in the second year, you do biochemistry and physiology. Actually, second and third year we did that. We did 5 semesters. And then we did microbiology and pathology. And then in our 4th year, we get sent to hospitals to start clinical training. So wherever you go, you don't choose your teachers. And also those teachers are supposed to impart the knowledge of certain subjects to you. They're not, as students, you have emotional needs, but it's not those lecturers or those professors' job to look after your emotional needs, And you don't have any particular obligation to them. They teach you subjects, you pass the exams, and you move on. And like me, you forget who they are, who they were. It's interesting, in the Tibetan system, you've probably seen the tankas, the paintings of the merit field, or have you seen? It's like a. I don't have one here. Anyway, I think you know what I mean. It's like a tree-shaped thing with all these Lama Tsongkhapa in the middle, or the Buddha in the middle, and these other teachers, and these clouds, and other meditational deities, and the medicine Buddhas, and the 35 Buddhas, all these different Buddhas and teachers and so on. And that's called a merit field because by making offerings and prostrations and so on to this tree of assembled gurus, as it's sometimes called, the Tibetan word is tsogshing, merit field. Shing, but shing, it may be different spelling, is also the word for wood or for tree. And it's usually set out in the shape of a sort of a tree, So we have Lama Tsongkhapa there in the middle, and sometimes at his heart is the Shakyamuni Buddha, and the Buddha's heart is Vajradhara, the primordial tantric Vajraguru, and then this surrounded by on one side is, so in our lineage we have these 2 streams of teachings, wisdom and method coming together, wisdom and compassion coming together. So the cloud that shows the wisdom lineage has Manjushri in the middle, and then Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, and then the lineage of the wisdom, and the wisdom lineage gurus on the other side. We have Maitreya and Asanga, and the method lineage, which is the bodhicitta practice lineage. So these two lineages came together in Atisha, who brought them to Tibet. So when we're visualizing our teachers in the Tibetan tradition, you should also visualize your alphabet teacher, because, you know, studying texts is kind of the fundamental basis of our knowledge. And, you know, the Buddha's, you know, studying the Dharma, we can receive oral teachings and all that, of course, we must, but and oral explanations, but we also need to be able to study texts. So without being able to read, there's no way to study the texts. And without having learned the alphabet, there's no way to know how to read. So Lamas will tell you that when they visualize their gurus, they start with their alphabet teacher. I happen to remember, well, I don't know, maybe my mother taught me the alphabet. I don't put her in my visualization. I don't put Miss Lyle in it either. Miss Lyle was my first kindergarten teacher. I think it's where we learned to read. So this is not the Western tradition, to put all your school teachers in the merit field. Anyway, so so even to learn these other subjects like chemistry and physiology and you know, geography and history, we had teachers for everything. So of course we're going to need a spiritual teacher for this, to follow all these stages of the path, and especially when we get to Vajrayana, to know which deities to meditate and which initiations to have and so forth. We need teachers. So so how do we find a teacher? You know, in my case, I found two teachers when I didn't even know I was looking for a teacher, really. So, you know, if you listen to my sordid tale, from, you know, a couple of Fridays ago, whenever it was, you know, for one reason or another, I got, you know, I graduated from medical school in '64, and then I practiced for 7 years, mostly in hospitals. And for one reason or another, I got disillusioned with the practice of medicine. So that's another story. But so my girlfriend and I decided to travel, take a break from it all. She was a nurse. So we had a 4-year plan. We planned to travel the world for 4 years, and then come back and see what happens if we're still together. So our first stop was Bali. So we spent a couple of months in Bali, mainly on the beach, and just hanging out and reading books and you know, watching the sunset and getting stoned and stuff like that. And but then, you know, after 2 months, even paradise got boring, so we decided to move on. Our original intent had been to go to around the Pacific Rim, to hop from capital to capital, and then across to Vancouver, fly to Vancouver, and then cross Canada by train, and to visit some friends. So some of my doctor friends were doing graduate work in Toronto, 3 of them. So we were going to catch up with them and hang out with them, and then anyway, travel down through the States and South America, and across to Africa and up through Africa to London, and then stay in London for a while, maybe do some work there, save a bit more money, and then travel through Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, back to Australia, 4 years. But in Bali, we met all these freaks from America and from Europe who telling stories of India and Nepal and Afghanistan and the Mystic East. So we completely changed our plans, and it sounded much more interesting to stay in the East than go back to the West. So we did. So then we left Bali after a couple of months, and we traveled north or west actually, and we fished up we were in Java. We went to Borobudur, which was this amazing stupa that we visited. Didn't know what it was really. It was one of the biggest Buddhist stupas in the world. It's been restored since then, and at that time it hadn't been restored, but UNESCO took it on a couple of years later, and I think Australia put a lot of money into, gave a lot of money to the Indonesian government to fix it up. The Muslims had cut all the heads off all the Buddhas. There were all these Buddhas everywhere with all their heads cut off. So anyway, it was restored, but that time it wasn't restored. We climbed up the top and sat on the top and admired the view and smoked a joint. Then we travelled, then went to Jakarta, then Sumatra, and then crossed to Penang, and then travelled through northern Malaysia into Thailand. And then when we got to Thailand, we started seeing all these monks going out on their morning alms round, and we saw stupas and Buddhist temples. And so I thought, as a dutiful tourist, I should find out more about Buddhism. So our budget didn't allow for buying books. So I don't know if I told this in the story, did I? We went to a bookstore and I stole my first book on Buddhism, ripped off a Bangkok bookstore. It was this complicated heist. I had my girlfriend, who's now been a Buddhist nun, my ex-girlfriend, for 47 years. She's been a Buddhist nun, Ishikadra. She distracted the bookshop keeper while I stole my book on Buddhism. And I showed the book. It was in that talk. It was called Buddhism. It was a kind of a pelican book, little paperback. So we traveled through Thailand, we got to Laos. I read this book in Laos. And as I was reading it, I felt this really strong, had a strong experience that this stuff sounds like, it felt like it was really true. I don't exactly remember what I was reading. It was karma or emptiness or some of the Buddhist teachings that really struck a chord with me, And so I don't know if it was past imprints or the cheap weed that I'd bought in Vientiane, but something made sense. And in the book, he talked a lot about meditation. So I didn't know what that was either. So I thought, well, maybe I should find out about meditation. But definitely got interested in Buddhism from that point. And, but, I didn't immediately think, I have to find a teacher or something like that. I said, I should find out a little bit more about Buddhism. So we traveled through Laos, we went back to Thailand, got to Bangkok, and there was this Danish guy who we'd hung out with in Bali, who so we hung out with him a bit. We were friends, and he'd run out of money, and he wanted to smuggle some marijuana back to Denmark in a false bottom suitcase. So I guess you all know how to make those, do you? So you get a hard shell Samsonite. You buy 2 hard shell Samsonite suitcases, and then you cut the top and the bottom off one of them, and with the second one, remove the lining, and then you fit one of the cut off shells into that, and then you put the lining. Well, then you fill the space with dope, and it's best if it's really pressed tight, so you get more in. So you do that with the top and the bottom, and then you carefully reattach the lining, and then you fill it with your stuff, and then you travel undetected through any airport in the world back then. And the only way they could really tell that it was a false bottom was if the customs guy put his hand on the top and the bottom and could feel that there's more space there than there should be. But they didn't usually do that. And auspiciously enough, the weed that you used to buy in Thailand was called Buddha grass, or they called it Buddha grass because it made you happy. So anyway, so he asked me if I'd lend him the money for his fare, and then he said, and then I'll go and I'll come back and I'll meet you in Kathmandu, and I'll repay you money with interest. So I was like, okay, a little business on the road, make some money instead of just spending it, except when you're stealing books. So so that was the deal. So he went off to Copenhagen with his false bottom suitcase, and we gradually made our way to Kathmandu to meet him a couple of months later. So when we got to Kathmandu, he wasn't there. But when we got off the bus, we met this other guy, Brazilian guy, Jose, who we'd also hung out with in Bali and Bangkok. And that's how it went on the trail, the so-called hippie trail. You'd bump into the same people over and over, and then you'd swap war stories, where to stay, where to eat, what to do, where to go, which beach, etc., which border crossing to avoid, all the important information. So this guy, Jose, happened to be at the bus stop when we got off. I don't know why. And he greeted us like long lost friends, which we were. And he said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, we've come to meet Lars. Have you seen him?" And he said, "No, I haven't seen him." So I said, "Oh, well, we're supposed to meet him, so I guess we have to wait." So he took us to his hotel and he showed us around town. And then he showed us where to eat and where to listen to music and where to get the best curd and where to get the best pie and where to buy dope, Freak Street. And then, as he rattled off the various attractions of the area, he said, "Oh, if you're interested in Buddhism, there's a meditation course starting next week at this monastery just outside of Kathmandu." So I thought, oh, okay, that's Buddhism. That's what I wanted to find out about. So, since we had to wait for Lars, we went up to Kopan. That's what it was, obviously, and found out, sure enough, there's next week this meditation course was starting. It was about 300 rupees a person for food, accommodation, and tuition. It's about $1 a day, and much cheaper than Kathmandu. So we decided to do this course, 1 month course, for 300 rupees each, and while we waited for Lars to show up and get the money back. So that's how I met my gurus. It was a dope deal. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, although it's getting legal, so you don't have to do so many deals these days. But you never know what's going to happen. So I don't think these days you have to quite go to those lengths to necessarily meet a guru. And there are plenty of people there who'd met their gurus more simply than that. But I still think that it's really worthwhile to go and stay in India and Nepal and immerse yourself in the Dharma there. It's very different. And there are many more teachers, a wider variety of teachers, if you put it that way, to meet. And if it's hard, it's, I think, easier to make a connection with the teacher there than it is here, because there's a limited number of teachers you're going to meet in the States. Of course, in those days, it was possible to meet and receive teachings and initiations and transmissions from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from his two tutors, His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, from Sekong Rinpoche, from Song Rinpoche, from Geshe Repton, from Geshe Ngaon Dage, from there are just so many of these great lamas who are still alive. But now there are the incarnations of these lamas who are giving teachings. I don't know if His Holiness Ling Rinpoche has come to New Mexico, the incarnation, or the incarnation of Song Rinpoche. I mean, there's Sekong Rinpoche, but there are many other younger lamas who you can meet. And of course, His Holiness is still there. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is still there. I think if it's possible, and it's just a whole studying and practicing Dharma in the East is very different from doing in the West. So just putting in a plug for that. But, it's possible to meet, with teachers being invited and so many Dharma centers springing up all over the world. There are hundreds of them in the States. So, there's this saying that when the time is right, the teacher will appear before you. That's a little simplistic. I think if you just sit in your living room, the time will never be right. There's no guru going to walk in through your front door just like that. We have to make effort from our side. And I think, it's good that centers have resident teachers, and a lot of people make connection with the center's resident teacher. And you have Geshe Sherab, there's a sort of a semi-resident teacher there. So, wonderful teacher, ex-Kopan graduate, Sarah Monastery graduate. He's perfect teacher, but not everyone's going to make a connection with him. So it's good if the center invites other lamas to come to teach. In Kurukulla Center here, we had late Geshe Tsulga, who's Geshe Larampe, amazing teacher. He passed away. His nephew, Geshe Tenli, who came as his attendant, who then became a Geshe, who's now the resident teacher, very good-hearted, learned teacher. But still we invite many teachers. We invite the abbots of Sarah Monastery. We invited, the Kurukulla Center has been going a bit longer than Tupan Norba Ling, but we invited, Ling Rinpoche was here. In the earlier days, we invited Cherden Rinpoche, Kyrgyz Senshab Rinpoche. A lot of these lamas have passed away now too. And then, so people make connection with these different lamas as well. So even if they don't really connect with the resident teacher, they have a chance to meet other lamas. But I think from the individual student side, if you want to meet, I say your teacher, but of course you can have many teachers. Atisha had 157 teachers. but still, if you want to meet teachers, you need maybe to go to other centers, to go to other cities, and especially I think go to the East, go to Nepal, go to India, go, stay in Dharamsala, and take teachings from different teachers and see who you feel a connection with. But however you do it, I think meeting the Dharma teaching, meeting the spiritual teacher is the most important thing in life. So whether you stumble into your teacher or you find a teacher intentionally, it's really what we need to do. And with that, I think we're more or less done.